Manolo, well, it's been a while since I've had a chat to everybody, but we definitely starting to move into winter now. The days are getting shorter. It's a bit of a nip in the air in the mornings and in the evenings. And anyway, I've had a fantastic time in the last couple of months. I've had some really nice tours, particularly because some of them have been for specific interests, and it's allowed me to do a lot more research into stuff that I needed to look at for some of these tours, and a lot of it has involved one, the missionaries. I had a lady out from the UK who was doing research on John Phillips, from the London Missionary Society, who was a great correspondent and friend of William Wilberforce and the whole anti-slavery movement. And we went particularly to look at what his influence was in the Cat River settlement, and how that affected not only what was happening here, but also in the UK at the time. And then I've had a number of families. One family looking for the traces of their ancestors in the Tumi Valley, which is around Hog's Back, Alice, and their ancestor particularly was one Reverend Chalmers, who came out here and established the Gwali mission in 1826. And the mission station itself has disappeared, but after a lot of scrambling around in the bush and head scratching and thinking, we eventually, on one photograph that we had of the grave, with a mountain in the background, we were able to sort of pinpoint more or less where this grave was. And after scrambling around in the bush for an afternoon and a whole morning, we found the grave, and it was very gratifying to see the family and how what it meant to them to find the grave of the earliest ancestor that came out to South Africa, as I say, in 1826. And it also allowed me to have a look closer at what happened in the Tumi Valley, particularly the settlements created by Harry Smith after the Seventh Frontier War, after the Sixth Seventh Frontier War, where he had three little military villages that were set up in the valley that were all attacked and wiped out on Christmas Day in 1850. But definitely the legacy is still there, and so that was great fun and really satisfying to be able to find these places. And then I had another family recently that particularly were looking for information on their ancestor who came out in 1820 and was settled in the Clumber area, or Carnival area as it was called, near Bathurst. And it got me thinking. I certainly grew up with the stories of the settlers, and it got me thinking about what actually, not what was going on here that brought them out here. I kind of understand all that, but a thing that's overlooked quite often is what conditions were like in England at the time that those British settlers came over here. And it must surely have been a motivation for them, because things weren't great in England and Europe for that matter. The Napoleonic Wars had just ended. There was huge unemployment. The Industrial Revolution was at its height. Any kind of protest meant that you could be thrown in jail for 6 months without trial. Europe itself, all round, was a bit messy at the time. And it's interesting to note that about 70 million people left Europe in the 19th century into the various colonies and overseas territories and so on. So at the time, and certainly in 1819, things in Britain weren't great. And so when the government came up with a scheme to bring settlers out to the Eastern Cape in South Africa, many people jumped at the chance or the opportunity. In fact, 90,000 people applied to come out here, but you had to be part of a party that had the necessary capital and skills to kickstart an economy that didn't exist here. So a lot of people applied, and many came out from fairly wealthy and well-to-do families that wanted to spread their risk a bit and establish something overseas. So they had money, they had resources, they had a cross-section of people that they could bring out with them to establish themselves here. But there were lots of poor people around, and the situation in terms of welfare in the UK and England at the time, there was no official welfare state or support for the poor, and they relied on the church and the parish to look after the poor within their parish, and this was putting a huge amount of strain on a lot of them at the time with the unemployment and so on. So a lot of these parishes got together and collected enough money to sponsor one or two people from that parish to come out here, and quite often they would have to link up with other people and form a party, and this was by prescription, and many of them were formed in London, and it led to a number of problems, because quite often the party leader was a bit opportunistic and took the money but really didn't organize anything, led to a lot of dissatisfaction. It was people that didn't know each other, so it was really quite a tough thing for them to come to terms with once they set sail for the Eastern Cape. And when they got here, they were allocated land. It was, for each party was given about 1,000 acres, which would have involved a portion for each man in the party, amounting to about 100 acres each. And it really wasn't satisfactory. It wasn't enough for them to really make something out of it. I mean, they'd been sold a lemon here. They'd been told that this area looked like rolling English parkland. They had no idea that the crops, particularly the grain crops that they grew, had little chance of producing anything substantial out here. And they were really thrown in the deep end. And on top of that, of course, they hadn't understood that there was the question of the Xhosa who'd been driven out of this area before they arrived, and that was bound to lead to trouble. So anyway, it's got me thinking. I'm putting together a newsletter at the moment, particularly looking at the settlers and perhaps from the perspective of what they left at home, as well as what they did out here. And of course, there's a lasting legacy of what those British settlers brought out and contributed to this part of the world. A lot of it was a very liberal way of thinking. A lot of the settlers that came out here were very much in support of the abolition of slavery. They were quite philanthropic. But then on the other hand, there were others that weren't, of course. So it made for a very interesting dynamic with all those people that came out here. But anyway, look out for the newsletter that's going to come up. In the meantime, keep warm, and hope to see you soon. Cheers.